Viki, you're all set.
Hi there. Can they hear me?
They should be able to hear you.
I tried starting the video, but the host stopped it.
I'm showing the screen.
Okay, great. As long as they can see me, we're ready to go. I'll get started.
Hold on a minute. Larry is asking to speak. Larry, you are on.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know we can hear it and see it.
Excellent.
Okay, that's kind of what I was asking. All right, cool. Thank you, Larry. I'm going to put you back on mute. No, I think he's already on mute. Okay, Viki, so you're all set.
Great. Thank you so much. Hey, glad to be back and getting to talk to everybody again. My name is Viki Kind, and I am kind, and I work as a clinical bioethicist, which means I'm the person that helps resolve healthcare conflicts in hospitals. So that's why I know a lot about when healthcare directives aren't actually working the way they're supposed to, and there's misunderstandings, whether that's with the family or with the doctors. It can be really challenging. So I just want to remind you that at every hospital, there's some form of ethics committee or bioethics committee, and you're entitled to speak with them and get some help if you're in a situation where either your wishes aren't being honored, if you're the patient, or if your ill spouse's wishes aren't being honored. All you do is call the hospital operator and ask to speak to the ethics committee, and they'll go ahead and help you. So personally, one of the reasons I do the work I do is that I've been a family caregiver 6 times. I have not been a well spouse, but I have taken care of my mom after a massive stroke when I was 21, my dad with vascular dementia, my aunt with MS, another aunt with heart disease, my brother after a traumatic brain injury, and one more aunt. She is still alive. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm 56 now. And she has all sorts of health problems. She's 90 years old. And so I get it. I get how hard it is to be the healthcare professional, but also how hard it is to be the patient and family behind the scenes, trying to solve this in a setting that is not always conducive to being helpful to us. So we are going to talk, hopefully you have a piece of paper. I did send handouts by email ahead of time. Hopefully those got sent. If not, I'm sure they'll send them out to you afterwards. So everything you're seeing on the screen, if you are seeing it visually and not just listening, will be in your handout, as well as some additional resources. And hopefully you have a piece of paper, because you might want to take just a couple notes as we go along regarding some of your personal thoughts, because the whole point of having a good healthcare directive is to make it personal and to work for you. So, okay, I'm trying to get my PowerPoint to go to the next one. That is weird. Okay, well, the current slide. There we go. Now it's happy. Excellent. So this is a true story. This is about a gentleman, Mr. A, and he was late 80s, and he had advanced Alzheimer's, and I hadn't ever met him before, like when he was younger. I only met him when he had advanced Alzheimer's. And what some of his family would tell me is that if I had met him earlier, they told me that I wouldn't like him. He was grumpy and difficult and rather challenging. And that wasn't all he was, though. He also loved his grandkids. He loved them so much, and he loved McDonald's. That was his favorite thing to eat, but now he has a feeding tube, so he's not eating anything that tastes good. And then also, he loved all sorts of different music. So he was a whole person. he was this grumpy, difficult man who also had these wonderful qualities when it came to his family. And unfortunately, he was in a situation where the hospital, the doctors, and eventually the court system was not honoring his wishes, even though he had created an advanced healthcare directive. Now, I'm going to call it advanced directive because that's what I use here in California. But I'm talking about living wills, durable power of attorneys. There's different language in every state. But basically, I'm talking about the document that says not who do you want to speak for you, but what would you want. So as we go along, I'm going to teach you how to create an addendum, something you can add to your basic advanced directive in your state. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. So back to Mr. A. So his document wasn't working for him. The doctors were misinterpreting it. Eventually it ended up in the courts and the judge was misinterpreting it. And I think that it might have been better if his document, which was drafted by a lawyer, and it was a good advance directive, but it didn't sound like him. This was a man who would say to people, if I'm ever in a wheelchair, just shoot me, right? That's what he would say to people because he didn't want to be disabled in any way. But his document didn't sound like him. I really think it would have been great if he had actually written something about this kind of an opinion, right? So what went wrong is that the legal document, the advance directive, sounded like lawyers talking. And the legal language was trying to communicate with the doctors. And what do doctors speak? They speak medical language, right? So we've got two different languages, lots of misinterpretations because they don't use words quite the same way. And there was no human language in it. There wasn't anything that gave a sense of who he was, what was important to him. There was nothing personal or meaningful in the directive. So one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is to create what I call a quality of life statement or a meaningful recovery statement. Now, on the next 3 slides, I've kind of laid out the questions that I would encourage you to answer on your own paper, you know, when you're doing this exercise afterward, okay? Because right now I want you to be doing a lot of listening. And I'm not going to go through everything on this slide. We're going to talk a lot about some of the most important ones. But this quality of life statement is the part where you get to say, this is me, this is what's important to me, and express yourself in your own words. And so I'm going to just skip ahead to this last part, and then we'll go through it more methodically. So some of the things you can add to this is if you're very religious or you come from a culture that has certain beliefs and wishes and rituals regarding health and sickness or dying, if you have strong opinions about what is important to you from those perspectives, you can write up a little paragraph. You're not going to write up big, long things because the doctors don't have time to read it. But you could answer, what do I want the doctors to know about honoring my religious or cultural beliefs? Another section I have is reassurances for my decision makers. Like, what would you say if since you're too ill and you can't speak for yourself, what would you say to encourage your decision makers to do the right thing and to give them some support and encouragement? Because it's not easy to be the decision maker, and I know you all get that. So let's start from the beginning of this, and I'll tell you the first way that his document failed him. His document said, if I'm in a persistent vegetative state or if I'm dying, and that's it. But it didn't address any other kinds of injuries or illnesses. So it didn't say Alzheimer's. It didn't say COPD, like lung issues or something else. It just said persistent vegetative state or dying. And the judge said to me, because I was there educating the court and trying to be a good advocate for him. And the judge said, is he in a persistent vegetative state? And I'm like, no. Is he dying? No. And she said, so therefore this whole document doesn't count. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it, because that's not what he meant. His words were taken literally because that's how the lawyer wrote it, but that's not what he meant to say. He didn't want to say that there's only one or two ways or one or two conditions where my wishes should be honored. He wanted people to understand that it's not the reason he got into a certain level of functioning that he would hate. It's that he was in that level of functioning, right? If I'm in a wheelchair, just shoot me, right? That was his words, not mine, but that was his words. So that was the first thing that failed, is because he didn't explain what types of illnesses might lead people to use this document. And he also didn't address both dying, but also if you're going to be ill, cognitively impaired, but you're going to live a long time, right? Because most of the documents are all about what you would want when you're dying. But as many of you know, you might have Alzheimer's for 18 years. You might have MS for 30 years. I mean, there are very long illnesses where you may need to have a good advocate. So everything that you're going to see in italics font is how I defined it for me. Okay, so I answered each of those questions that I mentioned earlier. And this is just a little bit of what I would say, because I want to give my decision maker the best support tool I can. So this is what I said. I can never list every type of disease that might make me begin to lose my mental capacity, but the list might include and is not limited to all types of dementia. Now, why did I say that? Because if I said Alzheimer's, maybe this document wouldn't apply if I had vascular dementia or Lewy body dementia or frontotemporal dementia, right? There's like 128 different types of dementia. So I didn't want them to take it literally, right? Like that mistake they made with Mr. A. So I said all types of dementias: stroke, brain injury, mental illness, anoxic event. What is an anoxic event? It's anything where you didn't have enough oxygen. So like the CPR, they weren't able to bring you back as quickly as they should and your brain was injured, or maybe somebody almost drowned. Anything where the oxygen didn't get to your brain is an anoxic event. I also said that I don't have to be completely out of it, like being in a persistent vegetative state, or coma or minimally conscious state, because there's more than just persistent vegetative states. There's different levels of unconsciousness for this document to go into effect. And I don't have to be terminal. Now, remember, these are my words. I'm not saying you should believe like I do, that you should want what I want. The whole point is for you to say what you want and to make it sound like you and be personal. But for me, I wouldn't want to be in a terrible condition long term. And so the next thing I say is, the point is that I don't want my life prolonged or sustained if my brain no longer works well enough to enjoy what is important to me. And if you ask my family, they'll say, oh, that so sounds like Viki. The point is that it's exactly how I would say it, right? Because it's supposed to sound like me. That's when you'll know that it's actually working. When somebody reads your document and your family goes, oh yeah, that's her. Or the doctor says to your family, does this sound like what she would want? And the family goes, yeah, so we want it to sound like you. Okay, so the next way it went wrong. So how did his document fail? He said, and this was the only personal language in the whole long document, he said, if I'm not enjoying life, then. But he didn't define what makes his life enjoyable, right? You and I already know some things he enjoys, right? I told you at the beginning, he loves his grandkids. But unfortunately, he doesn't see his grandkids anymore because his the way his Alzheimer's is expressed, he's very paranoid. He has all sorts of other issues that he gets. He's kind of scary even with his Alzheimer's, and so the little kids don't come over anymore. He loves McDonald's, but he can't eat anymore. He loves music. Oh, at least he can still listen to his music, right? So unfortunately, his document didn't say some of those things. He didn't say, this is what would be important to me. This is what makes my life worth living. And unfortunately, the courts and the doctors misinterpreted it. And I will tell you that, oh, I remember this. I can just imagine myself back there. And the judge says to me, you know, he's not miserable 2 hours a day, right? Because everyone had testified that maybe 2 hours a day, he's not miserable. She said, therefore, he's enjoying his life. And I was like, are you kidding me? I kind of wanted to yell because, are you kidding me, Judge? That's how you measure what's valuable to your life? Not being miserable 2 hours is enjoying life? See, that's the thing is, he actually had expressed himself, but not in his document. He'd expressed it to his family, but people weren't listening. Okay, so we can fix this because what you can do is you can answer these two questions. You can say, what is important to you, or what makes your life worth living? Now, unfortunately, we can't talk at the moment, but if there's something that pops in your head as I'm asking these questions of you, just like write down a couple words just to remind yourself what you might include later. So this is how I solved it. I said a little bit more than this. This is about half of what I said. But I said what makes my life worth living is I like to make a difference in the world. I want to be able to communicate with those I love. I want to be able to receive the joy that comes from personal relationships and to have some independence. I understand I may need some care. To be able to give love, not just receive people's kindness. And to not be a burden on my family or friends financially, emotionally, or physically. Now, this is me because I've been a caregiver 6 times and I understand the burdens and the cost and the effort that that requires. And I just don't want my family to go through all of that. They would. I have a wonderful husband. He would be happy to take care of me. Well, happy except for those days where I drive him crazy, right? Because it's hard to be a spousal caregiver. But I don't want to put that burden on them, especially if I'm not getting something that I want from that situation. Now, that doesn't have to be what you would want. You should write down what brings you joy, what makes your life a living. Some people tell me, I love to go out in nature. I would hate if I was trapped in the house all the time. I want to be out hiking and being outside. Other people say, I like to be able to still do crossword puzzles or whatever it is that makes you happy. Write it down so people have a sense of who you are and what is valuable. The next question you could answer, and I ask it 2 different ways, is what conditions would I find horrible to live with long term, right? Because in the short term, we can all put up with something. Or what would be a fate worse than death? So why do I ask these? It's because his document failed him. He didn't say anything in his document about what kinds of conditions would be horrible to live with, or how long to give him to be able to recover enough so he could enjoy life. The only guidance he said in his legal document is if I'm dying. And this is where the legal system thinks that they've just done a good thing. If I'm dying, that sounds rather clear. But medically, the way we hear that word, it's very different. Dying might mean that you're dying because, and we know that because you qualify for hospice, that you probably have 6 months or less to live. Is that the kind of dying he meant? Or is it just the fact that he has a terminal illness, right? And he has days to months to years to live, that eventually this disease will kill him? Is that the kind of dying, the definition he meant? Or did he mean actively dying? Actively dying is that in the next 24 to 48 hours, the person is going to die, right? That he's actively dying right now. So is it you're going to die in 6 months, in 24 hours? What did you mean by this, right? And this is the problem, is that he didn't define what dying meant, and he also didn't define those other situations that he wouldn't want to be in. So the first way I solved this is I wanted to address how long to give me to get a chance to come back to a level of quality of life that I would be willing to accept. So I wrote, please give me the chance to recover if recovery is possible. But if I'm not recovering to a level of functioning that I would think is worthwhile, whether terminal or not, then choose comfort, care, and hospice, which I understand will lead to my death. All of the following conditions do not have to be present. Any one of these might be sufficient enough to change my course of treatment from prolonging my life to comfort care and to allow a natural death, right? Because I want a chance to get better. I'm willing to go through quite a bit if I have a chance of getting back to something that's worthwhile as defined by me. So what are some of the things I wouldn't like? I wouldn't like to not be able to communicate by voice, computers, sign language, gestures. I know some of you may be taking care of someone who's locked in, that they cannot communicate to you, and you have to guess and do the best you can to figure out what they want. And that's really challenging for both the person that's being cared for and the caregiver. I also couldn't bear for my husband to visit me in a dementia unit and see me becoming violent or not recognizing him or hitting on another man because I'm so confused. For me, that would be a fate worse than death. And the last one was, don't park me in a skilled nursing facility hallway and tell me that this is a good quality of life. It is not. Now, this doesn't have to be what you would say. Do not use my words. Your words need to sound like you, and you need to express your preferences. Many people will say to me, I am profoundly religious and all life is precious. It doesn't matter what physical condition I'm in. You don't give up on me. You try everything. And even if I'm just laying there, if people can visit, even if I don't know they're there, that's still okay with me, right? Just for me, thinking of this as a bioethicist, tell me what you want and I will fight for you. You know, if somebody has expressed what they want in their document, or their family is able to tell me what they would want, explain it to me, and then I will fight for you with the doctors who aren't listening. I'll make sure that people are honoring your wishes, right? Because when I'm advocating for someone else, it's about what they want, not what I think is best for them, right? It's not my body, it's not my life. It's what would work for them. But if nobody will tell me what that person would want, it makes it so hard because we don't know what to advocate for. All right, so the third question that goes in this little grouping of questions. So I've already said what would be important to me, like what would be a high level goal, what would be a fate worse than death, and something might have popped in your head as I was asking you about this. So we have the high level goal, the low level goal, and this question goes kind of in the middle. What would be an acceptable level of better? Or you might think, I wouldn't like it, but I'd be willing to live with, right? What would I be willing to live with? I wouldn't like it. So here's what one of my friends said. She said, I think a fate worse than death if my brain could no longer register love, if I could no longer connect in any way with those I loved. Losing my speech, mobility, independence would be horrible. But I don't think that that would be a fate worse than death. There are so many ways to connect without those things, right? So she's giving me some boundaries, like, yeah, she wouldn't like these certain outcomes, but she can live with it. Some other people have told me, and this is one that came from a family member. She said, it would be okay if I couldn't recognize people because every day I would make new friends. And I thought that was amazing, that that's how she sees the world, that she can see that joy in the world. Another person told me, I would say suffering. An acceptable level of better, I wouldn't want to be suffering. But that's one of those words where you have to define it. What does suffering mean to you? Are we talking about physical suffering, nausea, pain, physical suffering? Or are we talking about emotional suffering or spiritual suffering? What is it? Please define it so I understand what you want me to know. Or one other person said to me, paralyzed with no means of communication with my caretakers. Of course, with all the sewing and knitting I do, just losing a hand would kill me. And I joked with her. I'm like, you don't mean, you wouldn't want to live if you couldn't sew. She's like, no, I mean, I would hate, right? That would be something I'd hate to lose that ability, but it's not what would say that would be unacceptable, right? It would just be one of those losses. And so I'm going to show you now, and I'll describe it for those of you who are calling in without seeing the screen. I'm going to show you kind of a way that we could draw what I just talked about. So it's just, it's kind of a square with a green at the top, a green bar like it's a spreadsheet kind of thing, and then a gray area in the middle, and then red on the bottom. So green is for go, do these treatments. The red is for no, those are not acceptable treatments. And I'll tell you about the gray in just a moment. So it's that same idea of what would I want and what could I live with? And between those two questions are all the things that would be acceptable. So if the doctor says we can do this treatment and it will land this person in this acceptable area because it may not be exactly what she wants, but she could live with it, then do those treatments. But what would I hate if that same treatment would only get me down there near what I would hate? Don't do those treatments. And I do understand that there's always a little gray area between those, right? There's a lot of things that are very clear cut. Definitely these are things we should do. And definitely these are things we shouldn't do. She would hate this. The gray area is that boundary between what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. So this is a way for you to use the answers to these questions to kind of sketch out where the outcome is that you want to get to. I want to get to this area, so will those treatments get me there? Or will those treatments only get me into the area that's red, like, no, I don't want that, right? So this is an exercise that you can do if your ill spouse can still communicate and interact and is willing to talk about this. It might be something where you guys can work on this together. If not, This is something you can do for yourself. I would really encourage you writing up this quality of life statement. Use those questions I've given you at the beginning and answer them in brief paragraphs, right? Don't write a lot. Explaining yourself, telling me who you are. And then for some of you in some states, your advanced directive or living will, it doesn't give you a lot of space to say these other things, right? There's a state form that you have to use. That is completely fine. Use the state form, but then there's usually a section called other or things I want to also say. And then right in there, see attached 2 pages or however long it is that you wrote it up. And then attach these answers to your quality of life statement, right? Because you'll use the form that the state requires, and then you can attach this addendum, this extra bit of information, okay? It'll help because maybe there isn't someone who knows you as well as your spouse or partner knew you, and now they aren't your advocate, so you have to advocate for yourself and explain yourself because not everybody knows everything about us, right? I'm going to skip forward 1 slide and then I'll come back to that other one. And when we think about, well, do people know us? Right now, we've been talking about what would you want medically, like in the hospital, what kind of treatments would you want? But the other part of this is, do other people besides your spouse or significant other or partner, do they know what's personal to you? Like, how do you want to be cared for? One of my friends who's an elder law attorney uses this question to ask what she wants people to create a care preferences document. It's not a legal document. It's not something that you're going to use in the courts. This is just a separate set of information that you can write down that says how you want to be cared for. What are the small things that will make a difference for you? So here's the question she asks. She asks her clients, when you are home sick in bed, do you want your feet tucked in under the covers or do you like your feet out? And some people tell me they want 1 foot out and 1 foot in. All right, so think about your answer. I'm sure you already know your answer. This is something people have strong preferences about. For me, I like to be able to have my feet out. That way, if I'm too hot, my feet can be out, or if my feet get cold, I can just tuck them back under. But I do not want the sheets tucked in. It feels too tight. Excuse me. So for me, I like my feet out. So for those of you who agree with me that you like your feet out, or at least 1 foot out, think about this. Imagine that you're in the care facility and this lovely nurse, every day he comes by and he tucks you in, right? Because he's trying to be kind and that's what he would want. He tucks you in and unfortunately you're either too old, too frail, not strong anymore. You can't kick the covers off. Think about how miserable that would be. So here's the thing is you know what you want, right? Your spouse or partner, they probably know that about you, but if they're not there to communicate for you, who else in your family would know that, right? So answering this kind of question says, this is important to me. It's the small things, that day-to-day comfort that will make a difference. So I would really encourage you to consider creating a separate little document. I just have a notebook that I keep on my desk, just like a little paper notebook, where I create a care preferences list. And I wrote on there, I hate mayonnaise. Never put mayonnaise on my sandwiches. I like Diet Coke. I don't like Diet Pepsi. Also, I like my feet out, not in. And you know, you can write down what time of day you like to wake up. Do you like to take your shower in the morning or at night? Or do you like to take baths? Or do you sleep in pajamas or a nightie? Or you, think about all the little things that make your day better. The things that, yes, they're not big medical decisions, but they're things that matter to you and make you more comfortable. Create like a little list, and just an ongoing list. Every once in a while, I think of something and I just go over to my desk and I write some more things down. If you are the caregiver for somebody else, as you are, hello, well spouses, you might want to start making a list of the care preferences of your ill spouse. Because if you are not there to take care of this person, right, because maybe you got sick or you had to go out of town, this way somebody else knows all those little things that will make a difference. Okay, so it's just another little exercise you can do, but this one can really make a difference because I want you to feel comfortable and comforted, and to not only get what you want medically, but also to get what you want personally. Okay, so I'm going to go back 2 slides, and I just want to mention this. This is not something I'm going to talk about for a long time today. I just wanted to mention that this thing exists. There are dementia advanced directives, which will address whether people want oral foods or oral fluids, like food, water, food, things that you take through your mouth versus through a tube, right? A lot of people have strong opinions because they don't want to have like dementia and to not be able to, they want to be able to, you know, not live a long time. So they want to do something called VSED, to voluntarily stop eating and drinking. You don't have to agree with this. I just want to mention this because there are specific advanced directives that you can create. I've recommended a couple here where you can document your preferences regarding food that you'll take in by mouth, right? Regular advanced directives talk about feeding tubes, which is a medical decision. But whether or not that you're going to be fed orally, if you had progressive dementia, some people have strong opinions about that. If you do, you might want to consider looking at some of these other documents and consider using them. I just want to mention it because I talk to a lot of older friends and older physicians, etc., that are concerned about this, and doing this, I'm just letting you know that these options are available and these are good documents. Okay, so I'm going to keep going forward. So if you have questions for me, because all sorts of things might have just popped in your head because I am talking about pretty challenging decisions. It's not all just black and white, like there's only one right answer. Sometimes there's a lot of gray. Make notes because I'll stay and answer questions afterward, even if it goes longer than the hour, okay? Okay, so I want you to create a document that talks about who you are, what matters to you, what's important, what does your religion say, all those kinds of things, and attach it to your state's document. One of the primary questions that we find in advanced directives, living wills, is, do you want CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation? And for me, this is a pretty messy part of the decision because there's a lot of misunderstandings and there's a couple different ways to look at CPR. So let me kind of walk you through this. So the first thing is will CPR work? We have to think about that because some people people who are younger, who are healthier, who have certain kinds of illnesses, CPR has a better chance of working versus if you're already on hospice and you have metastatic cancer, CPR is probably not going to work, right? There's the medical side of it. And then there's also will CPR be worthwhile for this particular person, right? In all medical decisions, there's will the treatment work and will it get something that's worthwhile for this patient, okay? So let me show you this, this graph. And at the top, I'll just describe it for the people who are listening only. It says how doctors die, and it also says Dr. Ken Murray, who has some great articles about this. And there's been research out there done about this topic. On the graph, it asks questions regarding CPR, ventilator, dialysis, chemotherapy, surgery, feeding tubes, pain medicine, antibiotics, all sorts of different things that might be offered to patients when they're dying or when they're ill. And then basically they ask doctors, would you want this? If you're dying, and they're talking about nearing the end of your life, not dying today, but moving in that direction, what would you want, doctors, as people? Not what you recommend to other people, but what would you want? And so let me give you some of the answers. There's 4 answers possible. There's yes, I would want it, or no, I would not want it. There also is undecided, right? I don't know. And then the last one is a time-limited trial. Try it for a while, but stop doing it if it's not going to actually work, if there's no clear improvement, okay? So they asked doctors, would you want CPR? 90% of doctors said, no, no CPR for me if I'm dying. And I was actually amazed because I thought that number was kind of low. I've asked this question of thousands of doctors, and I've only ever met one doctor that ever said yes, they would want CPR when they're dying. Most people, most doctors would say no. Ventilators, okay, so 85% of doctors said no to ventilators, dialysis, and chemotherapy. About 80% said no to surgery, invasive treatments. So there's varying answers. And there were some items like feeding tubes where they had an answer saying, you know, try it. Let's give it a try. But if it's not working, then let's stop it, okay? And that's actually a wonderful set of language that you can include in your document. If there are certain things that you'd be willing to try, but don't keep doing it if it's not helping, you can say, do a time-limited trial. That's the kind of language, the medical language that doctors would understand. And when I've actually taught this information to lawyers many, many times, I teach them to write doctor language in the documents so the doctors will understand, okay? So most everything the doctors didn't want, right? The one thing that they almost all wanted was pain medicine. Over 80% of them wanted some kind of pain medicine. They didn't want suffering. Actually, a few people said that about 10% said, no, I wouldn't want pain medicine. And that actually surprised me because it's like, really? You wouldn't want pain medicine? But that's when I step back and remember I'm a bioethicist and people want different things and I need to honor their requests. Maybe they have certain religious values or cultural values that pain and suffering has meaning and purpose. So I don't know, but I just thought that this whole slide, this whole chart was really interesting because doctors want very different things from what they recommend to us. Now, they actually did a study where they looked at how do doctors actually die, and they found out that doctors die just like us because they don't write their advanced directives, right? They don't like to write theirs. even though they know they should. Okay. Here was another study. This is a study they looked at. This was done at Harvard, and they asked healthy seniors, what would you want if you had advanced dementia and were living in a skilled nursing facility, nursing home? Would you want everything done, some interventions, comfort care, which means you're not trying to prolong my life, you're just keeping me comfortable, or are you unsure about this? What they got as answers is 50% of the seniors said, if I have advanced dementia in a skilled nursing facility, 50% said comfort care. 21% said everything. 18% said some interventions. And 11% said, I don't know. Then they showed these seniors a 2-minute video of what it looks like, a real life situation of a patient living with advanced dementia in a nursing home. After they saw this 2-minute video, 89% of the seniors said comfort care. Nobody, 0% said, I don't want everything. And 11% said some interventions or unsure. So 89% said, just keep me comfortable. Don't give me a lot of stuff, okay? Why did it change so dramatically? Because when people saw what they were choosing, they chose differently. And this is one of the things that I really advise people who are caring and making decisions for other people. You've got to get better information, not just what the treatment says it will do, but what's it going to be like to experience it. Because better information gives us better decisions and better outcomes. In the handout, I've linked to some of these end-of-life videos so you can actually see the videos they used with this research. And it might give you a more realistic view of what these things actually entail. Okay? So as we finish up, I want to go through kind of how I help other people make decisions regarding CPR versus some people call it DNR, do not resuscitate. Some people call it do not attempt, DNAR, which is probably the better phrase because a lot of times CPR doesn't work, so do you want us to attempt it? Or an AND decision, AND, which is allow natural death. It doesn't mean we're not going to give you comfort, but we're not going to hook you up to machines and things like that. So here's the first thing I ask families and patients, and I actually teach this to professionals so they'll have this conversation better. So I'll ask people, what do you know about CPR? And most people have seen it on TV. Somebody like will push on your chest, right? Chest compressions. Maybe they'll use that defibrillator and they'll say clear, and then they do like a little shock thing where they put that on your chest. It also may include medication. So they may give you something to like jumpstart your heart. They also may include intubation and ventilation. Intubation is they put a tube down your throat so the air can move into your lungs. And ventilators, everybody's been hearing about these lately with coronavirus. A breathing machine, respirator is another word we use. It's a machine that breathes for you, okay, ventilators. So after I ask people, what do you know about CPR? Because I want them to understand that it's not just pushing on your chest or blowing in your mouth. It can include all of this. The next thing I explain to them is that CPR doesn't work like it does on television. They actually did a research study where they looked at what happens on TV and how does it turn out. They found out that 75% of the time on TV, people come back to life, right? 75% of the time, and they look great. Okay, well, that's not the reality. These statistics I'm going to give you are for people who are in a hospital, right? Not a nursing home, not out on the street. Those are different statistics. Overall, in reality, CPR works 15 to 17, 15 to 17% of the time, 15 to 17% of the time. It only works for 1% of people with late stages of cancer. So if you have metastatic disease, stage 4 cancer, late stage cancer, only 1% of people are going to be able to be brought back to life. For people who are in a skilled nursing facility, only 5% of people who are in a nursing home will live after CPR. And that's even if they got the CPR in the hospital. When they get back to the nursing home, only 5% of all the people that got that CPR in any situation will live. And 2% of people who have dementia will live after CPR. That's a lot smaller number than the 75% that we've seen on TV, okay? The other thing that happens is that you may come back to life in a worse condition, both mentally and physically. I've given you a link, the coalition, ccc.org, and they have fabulous handouts regarding what it really means to have a ventilator, to have CPR, to have a feeding tube. And right now, because of the coronavirus, you can download these for free. So you might want to go to their website and then go to resources for patients and download those documents so you have them. Anyway, so if you have CPR, it doesn't mean you come back to life all better or even like you were before the CPR. For the few people that do get to come back, 50% of those few people that were able to come back to life will have brain damage that never gets better. 97% will have rib fractures, all sorts of other health issues. I don't need to go through them in great detail. But you're not going to just come back in the same condition that you were in when your heart stopped beating and your lungs stopped working, right? So there are ramifications to this. And the last thing I just want to share with you is that there are things that, why do doctors not want to have CPR when they're dying? And I'll tell you, nurses, I've never met a nurse who wants CPR at the end of their life, because it's not how you would imagine the last minutes of your life. It's not how you would say, oh, my family, or maybe you don't like your family, your friends are there, someone's holding your hand, they're saying some prayers, they're playing your music, they're telling you, I love you. Whatever it is, how you would imagine the end of your life, that's not what it looks like if you're getting CPR. That's medical. Somebody's over you, pushing on your chest, they're putting in tubes. It's not a nice way to go. So these are complicated decisions. I'm not telling you what you should do or shouldn't do. Right now, with my health and my age and my condition, I would want CPR if I just dropped, like right now. I would want somebody to do CPR for me. But when I get either older or sicker or closer, moving toward the end of my life, I absolutely don't want CPR, because I don't want that kind of end of life experience. I want a nice, peaceful, loving end of life situation for myself. The other thing I just want to mention is that a lot of times people think that CPR works for every disease. It really doesn't. That's one of the misunderstandings. CPR was designed for people that had a heart attack, for something that went wrong with the heart. But if you have a disease of the liver, doing CPR doesn't cure your liver disease, right? There's a lot of misunderstandings. So the other thing that I will tell you that you might consider doing, and these are called the Go Wish cards. I'll hold them up. It's a deck of cards. It's about maybe 40 cards or something. And they are different things that you might want when you're dying. Not the medical decisions, not do you want CPR or feeding tubes, but how do you want to be cared for? Like, would you want to not die alone? If you don't want to die alone, you would put this, you have 3 piles. Yes, I do not want to die alone. You have a no pile, like, nope, I don't need that. Like some people who don't like their family, they might say, nope, I don't need my family with me. Another person might say, not being connected to machines. Yes, no, maybe, right? So basically you take all these cards and you sort them into piles, and then you can write down your preferences. You can also rank them. So like in the pile of all the things you would want, what are the top 3 that are most important? Like you can write a list of in what order are they important. It's a wonderful conversation tool, and it's something you can do with other people in your life. And it's a great way for you to discover what other people would say, because you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised because somebody will say, oh, I wouldn't want that. And you'll be like, wait, I thought for sure you would want that, right? So it's a wonderful way to have that kind of conversation about the personal side, okay? So I really want you to have some form of directive, living will, documents that will help support your decision maker when you are in a situation like that. I also want it to not just be a standard form. I want you to attach some personal statement that you can write up. It can be typed or handwritten, and you attach it to your directive. And then I also want you to give copies of those things to the people in your life, right? Because the worst thing is when we get somebody, they're in the ambulance, they get to the hospital, they have their directive, and it says, call my sister Mary. And so we call Mary, and she's like, I didn't know I was the decision maker, because they didn't talk about it, right? Make sure you have these conversations. Make sure that you give people copies. The other thing you can do is to just tear a little piece of paper and then write on there who is your decision maker and put down their phone numbers and email addresses. Put down where your copy of your directive is, who your doctor is, like put their phone number and their website or however, because when you go to the hospital, as you know, I'm sure you've gone many times with your ill spouses, they need to reach somebody to be making those decisions. And if you're ill, you fall down at the mall someday when you can go to the mall again without the coronavirus, or something happens and they can't reach anybody. If you have that in your wallet, you just stick it in your wallet, that piece of paper, then the doctors and the nurses, the social worker will actually go through your wallet and look for your insurance card and your identification. And if they find that little piece of paper, they'll call somebody for you. So I always keep mine right beside my insurance card. So it's a lot of different information. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to do all of this immediately, but pick one part of this project and begin to write things down, because you want to make sure that people will do right by you, and that if I'm in that situation, that I can advocate for you with the doctors. And if I was your decision maker, that I could honor your wishes. So I'm not your decision maker. I'm the decision maker for people in my family, and I'm going to do right by them because I've had these conversations. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to stay and answer questions.
Okay, so if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. So far, I'm going to unmute Bob Mastro. Okay, Bob.
Thank
Bob,
you, Jerry.
There you go.
Thank you, Viki Kind. I want to thank you for doing such an excellent job and educating us. It was a wonderful webinar. And I had all those documents. I'm a former well spouse now, and my wife passed about a year and a half ago. And I really didn't have to use them, but I had them with me. In fact, I had them with me in the pocket in her wheelchair, and we had them wherever we went, and they were very valuable. And I'm sure, had I made those documents again today, they would be much better documents after having listened to this webinar. I'm sure I could have made many improvements to them. So thank you very much, Viki, for your help. As president of the Well Spouse Association, I want to thank you, and I hope that all of the people on the call will support Well Spouse Association. You can do so by going to www.wellspouse.org. And don't forget, we will have this posted on YouTube. Give us a give us a little time to get it posted on YouTube, and you can refer back to it again. Thank you very much, Viki.
Thank you. Can I just comment on Nancy's comment in the chat room?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, Nancy, hi, Nancy. You're absolutely right. You made a comment that CPR doesn't include mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, mouth-to-mouth anymore. So we want to be careful when we understand the difference between what the public does. If you find somebody has fallen down and and they aren't breathing and they're not, their heart isn't beating, what you're going to do as a person in the public is a different kind of CPR from what the professional is going to do in the hospital, in the ambulance. Yes, in the public, you don't have to do the mouth to mouth anymore. You just push on the chest, and you need better instructions than just what I said. One of the things I would do is I would call 911, put them on speaker while I'm checking the person, and then the 911 agent, they can actually give you specific instructions on where to put your hands and what to do. Yes, when you do have to push on them 1.5 to 2 inches deep, it's a very deep pressure, and it can break the ribs and the sternum, and it's rather dramatic. But we have to remember that that kind of CPR is not the same. It's the beginning of it, but the CPR that you get in a hospital includes all those other things I mentioned: medication, through like an IV, ventilator, resuscitation, the defibrillators, right, where they go zap and try to jumpstart your heart. So we just want to make sure that when we're talking about these medical things, just like we want our documents to actually speak for us, we want to make sure that when we're talking about CPR, in this context, I was really talking about what happens in hospitals, not what we do as the public. But thank you so much for having this extra information. I really appreciate it. Let me read Dina's comment, and I see Nancy also. Dina said, when my mom had a cardiac arrest, they attempted to bring her back even though she had a DNR. Do you have the right to stop them? She was in the hospital. Okay. Oh my gosh, I hear this so many times. It's one of the reasons that it's so frustrating. So this is why you want to have some kind of document. If somebody says, I don't want CPR, you need to have their directive. And just like Robert did, he had it with him all the time. So he could say, this is her document. She doesn't want this. Some states have a special form called a POST or a MOLST or a POST. It's basically physician orders for life-sustaining treatments. And it's a separate document that you and the doctor can write up together that gives guidance to the medical professionals that no, she wouldn't want this, okay? Yes, you have the right to try to stop them. When I'm communicating when I'm the family member and I'm communicating with a medical person, I'm not going to say, stop, don't do this. I'm going to say, stop. My dad wouldn't want this. My dad told me he doesn't want this. This is his advance directive. I'm going to try to say everything saying, my dad says, my dad wouldn't want, my dad would tell you, because they don't want to think that it's my opinion about what he should have, but that I'm speaking with my dad's voice. It's called substituted judgment. It's a medical ethics and a legal framework for how we make decisions for others. Sometimes, like in the emergency room, things are happening so fast, sometimes CPR happens. And also, if you don't have their document, they're probably going to get CPR, and then you're going to have to deal with that afterwards. This is why we really should have a copy of our document, especially if we have someone who's regularly ill. It might be a good idea to keep it with you. Nancy also said, my daughter's input changed our decision regarding the use of CPR with my husband. She and her family live with us, and we're clear mechanical CPR is not what my husband wants. You're welcome. You're very sweet, Nancy. Yeah, you know, I don't know what's right for each person. I just want you all to have good information, and not just regarding what they're going to do, but how it's going to turn out. That's why I tried to explain to you that there are going to be a lot of other consequences. You know, for me, I'm 56. If I have a broken ribs, that's going to be miserable. I will hate that. But the difference of me having that when I'm 56 versus 96, I absolutely wouldn't want that if I'm much older or much sicker or in a different situation. I also don't want my brain damaged more so than I am in that situation, right? Because I don't want to live like that. So that's why we want to think about not just what a treatment is in the moment, but how it's going to play out in the life of the person. One of the most important questions I teach people to ask is, what will it feel like and be like for my dad to have this decision play out for them? What will be the consequences of my decision? What will it feel like and be like for Bob to live with this decision? Whether it's small medical choices or big ones. When we're deciding for someone else, we need to know. Thank you, guys. If anyone else has a question, I'm still here. And if not, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Well Spouses. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, we actually have one other person who, unless Christine has had her question already answered. She had a question and answer. Said, my husband has defib and on hospice. I have asked him to turn off his defib, struggling with that decision.
So, okay, yeah. So he has some type of a defibrillator implanted on for his heart in case it slows down, it will give him the shock internally. Is that what she's saying? I believe that's what she's saying. So.
Yeah. So she can talk. She just has to unmute her phone.
Oh, hi there, Christine.
Hi. They've asked me when to turn it off, and I'm struggling with that.
Right. So the first thing I will say, I'm sorry you're in this situation, and I'm sorry that he's going through all this as well. The first thing I will say is that it really isn't our decision as the decision maker, as the well spouse. It's really the decision of the person that we're caring for. So what I would tell you to first do is to think about it. What would he tell me if he could understand this choice and understand the situation he's in and the ramifications of this choice? What would he say? Because you're supposed to speak with his words. It's terrible when doctors say to the family member, to the spouse or partner, what do you want, right? what do you want, spouse? And it's like, it's not what I want. The right question is, what would he say? So that's the first thing I would encourage you to do, is to, do a little thinking about what would he say. He is on, and I would also, secondly, then look at the situation. He is on hospice, which means that he is heading towards the end of his life. Doesn't necessarily mean it's today, but it does mean it's probably in the next 6 months, though I do know people have lived for years on hospice and some people only live days.
Right.
So does he want CPR?
He says no. No.
Okay, so the defibrillator at some level is the same as CPR. Because it's the same thing like when they do the little paddles on the outside of his chest and they go clear and they try to jumpstart his heart.
Right.
If he says he wouldn't want them to do that from the outside, then that probably is equal to having his defibrillator that's implanted inside him do that to him. They're the same kind of action. So if he doesn't want CPR from the outside, he probably does not want CPR from the inside. The other thing is that I don't know what situation he's in physically, how long, how much suffering he has, etc. I don't know him, and I don't know the situation.
Right.
But he, if he is cognitively able, if he can think for himself, then he should make the decision with you, of course, if he wants to talk to you about it. If he's not really mentally able to think clearly about this decision, and that could be because he has a mental, has had some mental damage, or he's on such strong pain meds, he can't think clearly, then it's your decision. But in all of these moments, it really is still, what would he want? So let me ask you, when you think about it that way, what would he say about this? What do you think he would say?
Right now, he is, I think he knows the end is coming, and I think he's fighting it. And
Okay.
at times he, wants to do everything he can to live. He has Parkinson's with the Parkinson's dementia.
Okay.
And a lot of times he has impaired insight. So he thinks safety is not an issue for him, and he really doesn't understand a lot of things right now, even though he thinks he does. And,
Right.
he's doing everything he can to stay alive, to do whatever.
Right.
But when I got approached about turning off the defib, I guess I just hadn't thought about that was another life-saving device.
Right.
And what would happen to him if that did go off, and how that would affect him.
Right. So some of that is a medical conversation. Like if they turn it off, what does that mean? It basically means that when his heart stops beating, then he'll die, just like he would have died if he never had that inside of him.
Right.
But
he has a pacemaker. So he has
a pacemaker. Right. So they can turn that off without surgery. They can just turn that off so it doesn't keep jolting him. It's
Right.
something that does need to be taken care of, because the person can be, it sounds terrible, but they can be trying to die peacefully and their heart is slowing down, and then the machine goes pop and it tries to bring them back, and it's really disruptive. So there will come a time that you really should do that for him.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that you said is that you said that he's not thinking as clearly. He has Parkinson's dementia. So what I would encourage you to do is, he can't make this decision.
Right.
To make a good medical decision, you have to be able to not only be able to remember things, like people think it's a memory thing, like here are the details of what we're talking about, but you have to also be able to connect the dots and evaluate the thought. So if this happens, then this would happen. So therefore it's that executive functioning, that more abstract, complicated thinking. It's not just memorizing information. It's about processing. How will that affect me? What does that mean? If he doesn't have that ability, it really is on you.
Right.
So then you step back into what he's told you in the past when his brain was clear, what he would have said to you before the Parkinson's turned into dementia, right? What would he have told you when his brain still was clear? I mean, the reality is that it's a terrible feeling to have to make this decision and to feel like it is your decision.
Yes, very much.
Very much. I totally understand that. The thing that gives comfort to most people that I work with is understanding that it's actually not your decision. You are just his voice. It's almost like you step into his body and his mind and his thoughts. Think about his values, what's important to him, what would be a fate worse than death. Like, imagine what he would say and then speak with his words.
Okay.
Do that, then you've done a good job.
Okay.
And when you get really close to the end, I really think you should turn it off. But if you want to leave it on for a while because that's what he would say,
Right.
okay. But I think there is a moment where you really should turn it off just for his comfort, for his actual dying. So
Right. Right.
I hope that helped.
It does help. Thank you. It's like I've got this opinion and that opinion, and my daughter is right there beside me, saying, "Mom, this is the best thing for him. We don't want him to suffer."
And that's the thing is, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a bioethicist. Talk to the hospice nurse. They know everything.
Right.
Ask her or him about what that experience is. What is it like to turn it off? How does that change the dying? Get more information so you feel comfortable. But, the goal of being a great advocate for somebody is to adjust to what is the goal now. At first, when we're a well spouse, we're advocating so they get good medical care and get everything they need. There's a moment when it changes where we need to advocate for a good death.
Right.
For a good dying experience, that we can advocate for a peaceful, dignified, whatever words that person would describe, happy, meaningful, religious, beautiful. I don't know. I mean, some people, they want their cat on their bed when they're dying. Other people, they want their favorite music playing. Right now, that's the stuff you should be worrying about.
Okay.
This decision and be at peace with it. And then think about all the ways that you can provide him comfort and support and joy in all the little ways that you still can.
Okay. That helps me a lot. I
Yeah.
think I'm looking at all the aspects of everything and not just saying, okay, turn it off. I just, it's,
Yeah. Well,
road. It's been a long time, and
well, it's hard to shift our direction. We fight so hard for our loved ones,
right.
but we just changed the direction and we're now going to fight for as many good days, weeks, months as we can get.
Right.
And that those last hours are the way that we're going to do the best we can. That's why I'm a fan of hospice, because people get extra support and medically and socially and personally, the whole family gets support. I would really encourage you to talk to the nurse, because nurses are so wise, especially hospice nurses.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for your help.
Miriam, I see that you asked how can we get the slides and how to download them. I assume that Robert will send them out through email. I bet when they get back to the office, and I know it's still kind of challenging in New York where they are. I think they're in New York. They will get those out to you. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get them out when we can. I'm having computer issue problems at the moment.
No problem.
When I can get them, I'll get them.
No problem.
Dina would like to ask a question, so
Sure.
I'm going to unmute her. Okay, Dina, you need to unmute your phone and you can speak.
Okay, thanks, Sherry.
Hi, Dina.
You will.
Viki, I just wanted to say something for Christine's benefit and maybe someone else's because, well, since I mentioned my mother before, when she was on life support after they brought her back, sort of brought her back, you know, she had a pacemaker, and that became a much more complicated thing than we expected, because at first when we mentioned it to the doctor, you know, he said, well, I could just put, I think he said a magnet over it or something. And then it turned out, he did do some research on which one it was. And, you know, it turned out you couldn't do it that way. It was very complicated and very unnerving at the end, let's say, because of that. So I would suggest for Christine to at least, you know, to talk to the doctor about the type of, you know, pacemaker it is, maybe what the brand is, in fact, how it's turned off. You know, it's just not something that we thought we had to know ahead of time, and it turned out to be really important.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dina. See, this is the power of Well Spouse, and the support that you can, and the knowledge that you share with each other. I mean, it's amazing how much wisdom I learn from all of you, and the support you guys give to each other. I love Well Spouse Association. And yeah, it's better to talk about these things sooner than later. You don't want to be making decisions in an emergency. It's so much better to have these conversations earlier so that at least you have a sense. Maybe you don't know exactly the right answer, but you have at least a better sense of where that person is in the way they see their health and their life and their dying. Thank you, Dina.
Thanks, Viki.
Okay, I think that's it. If there's anyone else who needs to speak, please raise your hand. Let's see, we answered the two questions, one from Christine and one from Dina. And I don't think we have any other. Let's see, how can we get the slides? If you would like to talk with me. Okay, so you have Nancy's information then, right? Viki?
Yes. I'm not going to say her Nancy's email address publicly because I don't want.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah, I agree. But you have her address, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if nobody else has any other questions, then we will conclude the webinar. Yeah, I do not see any other questions. Okay. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording, and you may disconnect at this time. Do I want to stop?